Welcome, everyone. We are excited. Emily and I have come together and invited Tim at the In-Between to be a part. So Hope, the Reentry Initiative, and the In-Between, all local Longmont nonprofits, have gathered together to really break open what is a pervading issue in our communities. It's been there from the start, it's still there now, and we're meeting even newer challenges with COVID and the socioeconomic challenges before us. So we're really excited to have a conversation that is both insightful and optimistic in the end. I'm going to be inviting each of the panelists to share for an array of questions. But before we begin with the questions we've prepared, I want to let you know that at any time during our panel discussion, you can type a question into the chat box and we'll collect those questions to answer them starting at 1 p.m. So feel free, if something's fresh on your mind and you want to make sure you ask about it so you don't forget, type it right in there and Jyoti and I will be gathering them for the end. So let's start by just a short introduction for our panelists today. Emily, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you, Kim, and thank you for partnering with me and bringing this wonderful group of panelists together to share information and start to find solutions to a really important topic. I am the Executive Director of the Reentry Initiative. I've been with the Reentry Initiative for a little over 2 years. Since we've come to Longmont, we have created a Welcome Back Center and Wellness Center for individuals on parole in Longmont, where they can come and receive all the services they need to stay stable in their community.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, Joseph.
Hi, everyone. Joseph Zanovich, Executive Director of Hope Homeless Outreach, and excited to be here. Most of you know about Hope and our services, providing outreach programming to the streets of Longmont, also sheltering services both day, evening, and overnight, and also our new Safe Lot programming available for those that are living in vehicles. I've been with the organization now for a little over 2 years as well. And yeah, really excited about all the change that's happening and all the services that we are currently providing and looking to provide for the future for Longmont.
Joseph, thank you. And Tim, would you like to go?
Thanks, Kim, and thanks for the opportunity to share. It's quite an honor, I would say. And I guess I'll stray a little bit from, I'm the Executive Director of the In-Between Longmont, yes, and I've been a part of the In-Between for 11 years. I have a passion for affordable housing in general, and as a licensed realtor, I can appreciate a lot of the different angles and considerations as it relates to real estate and housing in general. Personally, I have a affinity and connection to the Latinx community, having lived in Central America for some years, and then also have a wonderful wife who is a Mayan indigenous woman, and together we are raising a couple of beautiful biracial children, and challenged with how to do that with 2 different cultures. And so that also keeps me grounded, I think, and offers another angle that I certainly can appreciate.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. And Renee, what about you?
Hi, I'm Renee Eichmeyer. I am Hope's new program, Safe Lot Programs Program Manager. I have been with Hope since the beginning of June, when the Safe Lot opened June 15th. And I'm looking forward to this discussion because the topic hits kind of close to home for me. And so I'm very interested in being a part of helping to make it better, the issue. So.
Great, thank you, thank you. That's awesome. Just a note, and I'm taking note of the questions coming in. There are some really good ones there. And as you send more, we do realize that accidentally everybody is Kimberly as you send the question. So if there is a reason that it's good to know your name, put your name with your question. I am inquisitive, but all right. So how we wanted to set the stage for this is to first break open the title. When you have a really good title that goes into a discussion or a topic or a presentation, it's good to start right there, because that's really what we're unpacking. And that's what we're really looking for, to both understand and to create new opportunities from, is this topic. So first, I'd like to invite Emily to take the first concept, red lines or redlining. What is redlining?
Thank you, Kim. Well, redlining is a term that's historically been used in the real estate market. Started back in the mid to late 1950s. It was a systematic denial of various services from federal governments, local governments, or the private sector that either directly or indirectly selected rising of prices based on demographics of community. Prior to the Fair Housing Act in 1968, there was very little laws or policies in place to minimize discriminatory practices by businesses or agencies in different communities. When we were talking, Kim and I came together and we were talking about the housing crisis. And I had brought up this term of redlining to you because redlining from the 1950s and for 3 decades after that has resulted in what I see as social impacts on the community and the populations that I'm serving. It's generational wealth gaps that have gotten larger and larger due to what this redlining effect is. Some of the social impacts that I'm focused on are the race wealth gap, the race segregation in communities, the discriminatory practices around digital redlining, meaning access to technology, especially in the time of COVID in certain communities, and the affordability of those package deals for internet, as well as the most alarming thing, the health inequality that has happened from redlining. And that really made me question, how did redlining affect socially communities, and what can we do to reverse those effects today? And like I said, with the health inequality, health equality is synonymous with wealth in this country, meaning if you have the wealth, you have the privilege and the affordability to live in better neighborhoods, you live closer to better jobs, you might have access to transportation to make your life getting around town easier. You also might have more access to public parks and health exercise options, nutritional options. So being someone who comes from Baltimore City, who saw this play out in my own city, I am concerned now, living in Colorado, how this is playing out in a city like Longmont. And that's why I wanted to talk about it and bring the people that I feel are affected by it to the table today.
Great. Thank you, Emily. It paints a really nice picture of redlining, and we'll be getting into much more of the complexity. The second part of the title, there are 3 parts, is the juxtaposition with American Dream. And the very easy understanding of what the American Dream is, because we all have a feeling of that. I hear that phrase used oftentimes, American Dream, or living the dream, or meant to have the dream. It inspires within us a sense of personal autonomy. It aspires within us a sense of we're the land of the free. It has an ethos to it that combines a set of ideals that we really see aren't operative when we talk about this topic today around housing. Those ideals are equality for all, equal opportunity, liberty, everyone having the equal set of rights, and all within a system that we call democracy. And this freedom that we're talking about is an opportunity for everyone with very few barriers presented to them to have the chance for prosperity and success and upward social mobility. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the American dream. And then I wanted to invite Tim to get that really operative word, breakdown. Redlining, we've got American Dream, and we've got a breakdown. Tim, how might you speak to the idea of the breakdown of this?
Well, to Emily's point, I guess building on that, though redlining has been banned for some decades, the lingering effects are still with us. And if you're fortunate to own a home within a diverse neighborhood, you still probably are likely to not have benefited necessarily from the appreciation of your home as other areas and other communities. And so there's kind of one very real how that can play out, and thus your diminished opportunity for accumulation of wealth and access in general. Beyond that, really home, when we talk about American Dream, I think most people, what comes to mind is owning a home, or at least if not owning a home stability. So when you're denied that, or don't have easy access to that, then that's really the key ingredient to set you off on a course towards whatever ideal you might want to consider to be the American Dream. But when there's lack of choice, certainly that's not attainable. I think another emerging trend nationally is just the general deficit around affordable housing, which again targets people's communities of color and people of socioeconomic challenges. And it's really a national issue, but locally we're experiencing it right here in Longmont. And so that lack of inventory we have for affordability really puts people in a situation in which they just don't have that fighting chance to succeed, or to really even just to survive within our community. Generally, the accepted guideline for home or housing affordability is 30% of your income. Many of our people are expending 50, 60, 70% of their income towards housing and utilities, which is just not sustainable and really puts people on a path towards homelessness or instability. And so, these are a couple of things that are playing out, I think, here within Longmont we're experiencing, but it's not, again, just a Longmont issue. It's really a nationwide trend. And so, again, when keeping on the positive, there are some solutions and some good things of which we can talk about, I think, in subsequent questions, but that's really the reality of which we are still facing, and I think we need to own that.
Yeah, thank you for, again, giving such an illustration of the notion of breakdown. And I was really touched by the intimacy of the phrase fighting chance. That's got a lot to it. And what we're talking about is incredibly complex. I think if you're attending, you already know that. And now just even hearing Emily and Tim speak a little bit, you get even more of a practical taste of that. So we wanted to invite Renee. We've all had lived experience of inequality and challenge in our lives in one way or another. But we wanted to invite Renee to share a little bit, since she's Longmont local and has worked with some of the mediation services to have greater opportunity for herself. So Renee, will you share some of your lived experience with us?
Yeah, about 6 to 7 years ago, I had a home up in Loveland that I owned out at Carter Lake. I worked for CSU as a programmer. I had 2 cars. I went on business trips out of state. I had, I guess, the American dream. And this homelessness can happen to anyone. If you would have asked me back then, do you think you'll ever be homeless? Of course, I'm going to say no. Why would I? I make good decisions. There's no way. But something unexpected could happen to anyone that starts this downward spiral of bad decision making and situations that cause this. And so mine was a separation from my husband, and that led to me leaving him, being temporarily homeless. And then there was substance use, and that leads to not thinking clearly and making even more poor decisions. There was just a number of things that kept me in the homeless situation that I was in. And it turned from being temporarily homeless, living with a friend, to out on the streets homeless. And I continued on that route for 5 years, because once you are at that level, it is near impossible to get out of that, because the time that and effort and mental capacity that you would use to normally troubleshoot and try to find a job or whatever is not spent doing any of those things. It's spent trying to find a place to shower, going to get your showering items from the other place that you left it, trying to get transportation. Your phone is dead. How do I find the bus route? It's just the entire day, and it's taken up by needing to survive, that you don't have any room for anything else. And I think what helped me, it takes one person or a group of people to reach out and actually understand and help that person, and know that everybody deserves a second chance. And that's how I was brought out of the situation, I guess. And so it's not just what's available to people, the resources, but it's the people's way of thinking that has to help that too, because you can get all the help you need, but if you're under the stigma that you're never going to get better, or you're a felon, you don't deserve this, or you have no morals, then you're just going to stay in that hole and not get the opportunity to live the better life. So
Thank you for sharing so vulnerably and openly. And as you can see from what everyone shared, we're getting a real taste of the complexity of the problem. Joseph, how might you speak to the complexity of the issue? What might you add to what's already been shared?
Thank you. Well, first I want to recognize that between myself, Emily, Tim, and Renee, we share 4 unique viewpoints. There are, and probably of the 50 other folks on this call, there's 50 other viewpoints on how things could be handled. Other organizations, developers, council members, members of the community, that all share a viewpoint in what they see, what can be done, should be done. And, right, so this discussion is, from some very unique viewpoints on this, obviously may lend itself to further discussions on this. For me, I come from the viewpoint, as Renee, thank you for sharing, when folks experience homelessness, what it's like for them to then get back into the housing system, and how difficult it is for anyone who's experienced homelessness to get back in. For some folks, they may have decent credit. When they started experiencing homelessness, they had a job. And for them, their path getting back into homelessness can be very short. That's not the case for most individuals we serve. For most, ending up in homelessness, credit is one of the first things to go. Then the unfortunate reality, there may be a criminal record, whether it's a minor offense or felony offense. Then other things will happen where most folks are not worried about, oh, I need to keep up these certain levels so that when I get back, when I have the opportunity to get into housing, I can, have an easier time. It's more like, I'm in survival mode. What do I need to do to get through today? Right. So the mentality isn't thinking, I need to do all these steps to get into the housing. It's just about survival. And so that's the viewpoint that I see on a daily basis, and the struggles our folks are facing. We provide as many resources as we can. And I like to tell this model of a hands approach, right? When someone loses a home, they need as much support as they can from the bottom up, right? And that support can lend to different aspects, whether it's, a place to stay and have food, resources for the next step, whatever that is, right? We need that. But after this is where we run into so many issues, right? After that there's a lot of organizations that provide basic support. But outside of basic support, it's where we run a lot of issues with housing. And that's arguably one of the most important aspects to this recovery cycle that we need to get folks back into. And I know we'll dive into more of those details later on in this conversation, but that is what I constantly see as the struggle outside of basic support to get into housing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Joseph. And just to add a little bit with that, because the ethos, I think, of the American dream is so strong, it has the adverse effect of feeling less about yourself. If you're not able as an American to rise into what the American dream means, if you're not able to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, if you're not able to accomplish certain ideals, there's also a chipping away of the sense of value and purpose and dignity that just it's inherent because we're made as human beings to have value and purpose. And as that gets chipped away, the mental capacity, the resourcefulness that's inside of a person also gets challenged in that too. And you can feel incredibly, incredibly alone. So recovery cycle, I liked that phrase that you said, Joseph. That's a really good one to kind of hold us in that full circle approach. So the word affordable housing gets thrown out there a lot. And I know that since I started working with Hope, it's been something that I've gotten to learn more about and how tricky that phrase is because everyone uses it in different ways. And there's a lot of assumptions that go into that word affordable housing. Emily, how might you help us understand the illusory quality of that word and how it plays out in the Longmont community?
So affordable and low-income housing sounds as if it is meeting the need. But when I look at affordable housing, it does not equate to income. Like Tim was saying earlier, many Americans spend well over 50% of their income on housing alone, housing costs. And that includes maintenance and energy bills and internet in the house and everything under the sun. What I think when I think of affordable housing and when I go in and look at these apartments that my population that I serve is trying to get into, the first issue I'm running into is that low income affordable housing is not necessarily open to people that have a felony record. So right off the bat, when Section 8 opens up or certain different programs open up through HUD, which is Housing and Urban Development, I find that a lot of the times, more often than not, my specific population, due to a criminal history, is immediately banned from even applying for the housing. So then we're kind of pushed into looking at private landlords or other, private landlord or apartment buildings and those type of situations or room for rents. And when I go into those homes, I'm quite disappointed in the aesthetic of what I'm looking at. So they're asked to pay probably 2 to 3 times the first month's rent for security deposit, which could be $3,000 up front prior to even moving in. And they move into an apartment that's subpar and compared to these pop-up beautiful apartments that look like an IKEA showroom. So right off the bat, when you say affordable to me and I go to look at those affordable apartments, I don't think it's dignified nor even in line with what really is affordable, especially on a minimum wage job. Again, there's so many complexities to all of this conversation because if you have a felony, you probably aren't going to get a very high paying job right off the bat, or there'll be barriers to that. And again, then you're stuck with paying more than 70% of your income a month towards housing. So it's a vicious little cycle.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And just so you all know that are attending, we really wanted to lay out some of the depth and intricacies of the problem, not to create a sense of powerlessness and leave us feeling defeated, but so that we might really innovate new solutions, which everyone here will be speaking to towards the end. But we also invite you to kind of get deeper into the problem so that some thoughts that maybe you didn't have can come forward as solutions. So I know, Joseph, when we had a chance to talk, you used an awesome phrase called system stacking, which is another dimension of complexity to the issue. Well, what does this mean? What's system stacking?
Yeah, I just came up with this term out of frustration. Emily just alluded to a lot of this idea that the job aspect, right? The variables that affect someone from getting a well-paying job, which which previously were affected by, something that happened with either homelessness or something that happened, which leads this track of from credit scores to criminal record. It affects their wage, their job history, and then their rental history, right? So you have all these historical aspects of someone's life that end up stacking against them over and over and over again. And it makes it practically impossible for someone within, a couple years to be able to dig themselves out. For someone that has resources, there's bankruptcy, right? And they can file bankruptcy, but still go out and, get another loan, or they can do other things under a legal aspect because there's resources to do it. If you don't have those resources to declare bankruptcy and file some legal protection, you're stuck, right? We see this time and time again where the higher end, I mean, Emily, you hit it on the head, right? They're paying double, triple times the amount of deposit because someone looks at their credit score, the rental history as unfavorable, and they're like, well, this person, in a way, it's a threat to someone that's a homeowner, that's a landlord. I work with a local organization who's a big supporter of what we do, and I talk to him, and I've had in-depth conversations with him. He operates a lot of housing here in Longmont for landlords, and he says it's frustrating because there's a fear variable when someone comes to rent their property and they look at the history that's in front of them. They're going to take someone with a much better credit score, not high as a criminal history, all these other factors weigh again. So folks are constantly being pushed to the back of these lists, right? And so we talk about the supply aspect. We already know that's a given, right? We need more supply. So you have these variables stacking against folks that don't have everything maybe perfectly aligned, that someone who doesn't have credit history, hasn't experienced homelessness, because if someone who's just out of college, making $15 an hour, no criminal record, walks into an apartment complex, they're going to get the apartment over someone who has a history, who has things in their history that are unfavorable. It happens time and time again. And so the cycle continues over, and the search will continue for months until, usually it's a private landlord that will come through and say, hey, I'm willing to give you a chance, or a referral from someone like Tim or Emily or myself that says, hey, can you please just give this person a shot? Because we've seen, them really try, and, we're giving them a referral or reference. But so that's the frustration that I constantly see. And then, we talk about all the positives. I mean, we need to be in the house, like all of us need to be in the housing business at the end of this, right? But, and I want to, obviously I love to talk about the positive aspects of what we can do, but the frustration right here that I just want to, relay is, yes, that system stacking is present, and every single day we see it.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. And I think what's been a recurring theme among what everyone shared is this sense that we have a culture that is an unforgiving culture. We have a culture that once somebody has a narrative that's part of their history line, that they can be limited and defined by that for the rest of their lives. And if everything around you limits you and defines you by that, it takes a valiant spirit to say, no, I'm something more than that. No. And there are other complexities that come into that too, because oftentimes not everybody is the type of personality that thrives in our kind of society. That there can be trauma that exists, that's going to exist to the end of that person's life. It doesn't make them useless or lacking to deserve to have a home, but they may have an enduring set of challenges that aren't simply going to go away. There's also the qualities of knowing that there are other cultures that operate in a very different way than we do, and they're more natural for a different set of personalities, right? Work ethic comes into that. What it means to be a success comes into that. There's a full range of other barriers that are set in place just because of the systems and ideals that we have in place. And as we were all talking, we were preparing for this panel, we wanted halfway through to break through to what's some light, because these three organizations are only three of numerous human service organizations in Longmont who were inspired by recognizing a need, right? There was one person or a handful of people that saw a need, that identified it so clearly that they could say, I can meet that need. I can do this one step, this one action that in my community will make a difference. But as the three of these organizations gathered, there was something that was also a unified experience, and that is that there seems to be something in the human person that has a will to live, that it recurs over and over again, that whether it's buried under trauma, whether it's there, present, and able to be acted on 100%, that there is a will to live, that there is an essence within us as human beings that gives us a place to start, a hopeful place to start. And Renee, I wanted to ask if you might speak to that, because you made the difference between a will to live and a will to live better. So that even builds on that essential quality of the will to live. How might you shed some light on that difference between those two qualities?
I was fortunate enough to know how to live another way. Like I said, I had a house. I had the choice of what I was going to cook for dinner tonight, not was I going to have dinner tonight. I had those choices, and I knew that. So my hope, I guess, was different. Mine wasn't just a will to survive. It was, I had another hope that was that I could get back to my prior life, that I could be less stressed or have different stresses, or I could have a car, I could do fun things instead of always having to try to figure something out. A lot of people don't have that. They've been doing this their whole lives. They've come from a family where they've always had to finagle things or hustle things to get what they need. Their hope doesn't look like, oh, I hope someday I can have a house, a car, and a yard to mow. Their hope is not that. Their hope is, oh, I hope I don't have to steal something tomorrow to get what to get my food or to get a coat. That's their hope. And so it's there's different levels of hope, and it comes from what you're used to. And so I feel like if a lot of people were given just a taste of what it feels like to actually have freedom instead of, and I say that when you're homeless, you think that you're doing that because, like, the people that prefer homelessness, they say that they're free. They don't have to report to anyone. They don't have to go to a job. They can do what they want, but that's not true. They do have to report to someone. They have to figure things out to try to survive. Real freedom is when you get to decide what choices you're given. And I guess that's what helped me to get out of the situation I was into, is knowing that it doesn't have to be that way. I can actually be truly free.
Thank you. Well spoken. That leads into, we have a slew of possible solutions and contributions, but that leads into, Tim, what you said, and that's creating what you said, supporting components, the retooling and relearning. How could this be part of a solution to this enduring problem?
So the in-between of Longmont is, in its 26 years of existence, essentially has the same model it has all along, which is it starts with housing. And so you can, throw out terms like housing first or what have you. A lot of these different things have taken root over the years to give it a name. But it starts with getting housed. Once you have that, then you begin to be in a place where the other things, you have the opportunity for the other things to fall into place, and you can build on that. And to be able to move forward and break down or to eliminate some of these varying barriers in the system stacking that Joseph was speaking to, and some of those things that have been accumulating over the time of being homeless. What we're about is providing that supportive system, supportive structure through advocacy and trainings and connections to resources and navigation around all of that, and having somebody to walk and be in alignment with where you want to go in life. As to, Renee's point, very few people actually choose to be homeless. It's not really a choice. And the preference would be anything but that. And so for those who are looking for something else and want to be able to move in other directions, a place like the In-Between is that option. And about 3/4 of the apartments that the In-Between has are for people what we would call in a transitional situation. So they come to the In-Between house for a couple of years, and that gives them and provides them the opportunity to be able to build on those things and develop competencies and capacities such that they can then be successful when they go out into the community and live once again in a stable situation. So that's what we're about. It's as Joseph was talking about, that lifeline, or that the beginnings of those critical services that are there when a person is truly at the bottom. But then after that, what happens next? And so we provide some of that structure to be able for people to thrive and move forward. I think the other thing too, though, is what we're speaking to here is those are things that are somewhat within the control of the individual or the household and the agency to be able to apply some of these best practices. But there are macro things in play, and those are the challenges of the community at large. And then I think if we, as a community, if we can agree that when the majority of people thrive in our society and our community, we all benefit. And it makes sense for us to consider those that may not be in the same place as we all are, or be fortunate to have what we may have. And recognizing that, I think that's the general philosophy. We can agree to start there, then we understand that what's missing. What do we need to do? Is it additional inventory? Is it inclusionary zoning like the city has put in place in 2018 to provide that structure so that there's going to be some process to be able to pursue more affordable housing and more development in that way. And those are steps in the right direction. And so on the bigger, livable wage is another thing to throw out there. When we can support a livable wage, people have the opportunity again to increase their income and therefore maybe afford a place that is adequate. So if we can get behind efforts, I think that's what we should be about and need to be about, because really ultimately it makes sense. We all benefit from that. And quite frankly, it's a lot more expensive not to do that. And supporting a crisis and a sheltering situation is far more expensive than putting our resources in these other ways that can be more proactive. So again, those are just a few things, but the In-Between is we're fortunate to have a system that works fairly well in providing some support for those families and individuals to move forward, hopefully then, to that next and better step.
Thank you. That speaks to it. And all three agencies, along with other human service agencies in Longmont, if you wanted a starting point, get intimate with the agencies themselves, because all three of these here offer a breadth of services and are looking at it from all angles and providing the personnel and the resources to assist in that retooling, relearning, and that walking with mediation, that it would be nice to have the larger community take on full force. But to that, then Emily, one of the solutions she mentioned was investment. What a rich word that word is, investment. So would you like to speak to that, what that means on a practical level?
Absolutely. So investment to me can come in lots of different ways, but when you're investing in your community or investing in a human being, I'm thinking about, gainful wages or employment where you have advanced career options. So, it's no longer appropriate to hire someone just for shift work to be a body. I really believe that employers have an opportunity, especially when they're in power, to advance their staff and continue to invest in them in different certifications thusly that will affect your business and enhance what you're serving. So things like that, like if you can start a managerial process, if you're in a retail business where you're helping individuals that only have a high school diploma, invest in them to get some certifications, and then they can manage your business. Other investment, meaning if you're building housing, there are definite ways to make it more aesthetically pleasing, planting gardens, making it accessible to employment options, making the home itself feel inviting. It can completely change someone's mental health in general if you gave them a place to thrive. So when I think of investment, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, thank you. Those are some great examples and just a tip of the iceberg of where we could go with investment. Another solution, I want to invite you, Joseph, to speak to it, is healing NIMBYism and engaging true social mission, stepping into it. This is a serious issue and something that's right within our ability to heal.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly. If there's one topic that frustrates me more than any other, it's this. For those of you who don't know, NIMBYism, not in my backyard, what that stands for. And I've engaged a lot of these dialogues and conversations with neighbors and those that are opposed to projects. And this can vary anything from a safe parking project in a church parking lot to shelter to affordable housing. We see it. And then for those that may be listening in from the city level, they hear this all the time, especially in the housing department. And, developers hear this all the time. And, so before I dive into that, I just want to say, like, City of Longmont they put out a consolidated plan from 2020 to 2024 of how they're going to try to tackle some affordable housing issues. They took a lot of input from the community. There are some affordable housing projects going up around the city, so I applaud the city for doing what they can right now to do, within their reach. So there's a lot, and that would lend itself to another discussion as far as what the city of Longmont can and can't do with their limited resources. But when it comes to NIMBYism, let's talk about the F word, fear, right? Everything in NIMBYism is related to fear. It's the fear that things are going to change. It's this idea that there's a lack of trust. There's a developer that's going to come in and build this housing, structure unit, whatever it's going to look like. I don't trust that developer. I don't trust that they have the best interest of the neighborhood. And that, so there's a mistrust there. Another thing I hear is delusion of culture. Well, this is going to change our neighborhood dynamic. How dare we bring in people that don't look like us? Right. So there's this fear that this neighborhood is going to change for the worse. And then also overall, it's just fear of change, right? That is ultimately what's driving this, is that I know for myself, it's hard to know what's going to come next. And so, especially for folks that have lived in a neighborhood for 20, 30 years, and they've, children have grown up there, grandchildren, right? That's part of them. That open plot of land that's been there since they've moved there, they take ownership over that. I know in the chat, Gary mentioned of Gary Kinsey, who built an affordable housing project just off me behind Burger King. It received just so much backlash for wanting to build there. And a lot of the reasons that I heard was, well, that open land, that's ours. Well, no, it's not yours. And the reality is that plot of land is now going to be used to house, I think, 45 or 50 people. And so there's this idea that the neighborhoods are taking ownership, and there's fear that people coming in that have less income are automatically bad people, or just going to come and ransack the neighborhood and destroy everything. And so I see this all the time. And those that have been a part of these housing projects, Tim, I know you have experience in this, is that this doesn't happen. These fears are unfounded, but it's this fear of change that is so frustrating. And I know from the city level, I talk to city staff and council members, they get these complaints all the time. It's frustrating. And it's so often than not, a lot of these developments, I have to go through all these meetings, and you hear the same repetitive complaints, fears over and over again. And every so often you'll have someone that is like, well, you know what, I could actually use this housing. This will benefit me. And those are some of those powerful statements when someone's brave enough to go into those rooms full of anger and fear, that people are like, I don't want this here. I don't want this traffic. I don't want this appearance. Emily, you mentioned this too, like the looks of these things, like, you know, we make these things beautiful, like make them fit into a neighborhood. It doesn't matter if there's beautiful park-like, you know, developments, doesn't matter. It's change, and that scares people, right? It scares this idea that something new outside of what I'm used to in my neighborhood is going to come in. So I really want to challenge folks in the dialogue and the conversation. Everything that's been said in these dialogues is nothing new. They're all the same complaints, and they're all based on a fear. Data proves otherwise, that when these developments and, you know, affordable housing projects come in, they actually change a neighborhood for the better. They change a community for the better. But it's hard to overcome that fear. And so anyone that, you know, is scared of a development coming in, I really enjoy having the conversation, because I want to hear what that fear is, and we can talk about that. And I also challenge anyone that has a fear to talk to someone who would benefit from that development coming in their neighborhood. And, you know, more often than not, that changes the tone, because it's hard to deny someone, you know, if you grew up in, you know, housing in Longmont, and you have this home and it's built an incredible amount of value, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, but someone who's just coming in, you know, Kimberly and I talked about this, like if you've just moved into an area, you just moved into this area in the last couple of years, it's so hard to afford rent. It's so hard to be able to afford place here. And I'm challenging us as a community, let's find our heart, right? Like folks, we have enough equity in our homes, right? If you've had your home for a while, you're doing okay. There's folks that are struggling, right? Let's stop being scared that we're going to lose equity in our homes by giving someone else an opportunity to live, right? Would you rather drive by someone that's sitting on the corner of the street holding a sign, or would you rather that person have a chance to be in a home in your neighborhood where they can thrive and actually, you know, you may get to know them and know that they're an amazing human being, right? That's my challenge to our community. And so anyone that wants to have that dialogue with me, I'm always welcome. I always want to have that dialogue. I know there's a lot at play in there, but really the F word, the fear word, is so big in this. And let's challenge that. Let's change that narrative to yes in my backyard. Let's change it to yes, because when we say that, we reduce the fear, we open ourselves up to change, which is positive, and we create a better community for all. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but this is a big thing for me.
Thank you very much. In addition to that challenge with NIMBYism, it butts against the notion that we have that our land is our land personally. If I've made my money and I bought my house and I have my yard, this is my creation, and I want my creation to look and have the experience that I want. And losing sight of the fact that as human beings, we actually realize our fullest potential. We realize our greatest happiness in interdependence. No one is ever an island. And I think that NIMBYism also butts up against the intention in America that we can have home ownership, the beauty and the freedom of having an ownership of our experience, a carving out of our experience, the freedom to create the life we want. But with that, then we put walls around that life we want and say, you can come into my fort, but not you. And so I think there are other things at play there that challenge us on a deep human level that have to heal and have to change in order for us to create a society where all thrive. So thank you, Joseph. So Renee, you mentioned as a great solution to it that it's possible for each person to know the resources that are out there and to have a ready hand to tell others about them. Can you share more about that? Oh, you're on mute. Oh, everyone's muted. We're all
Sorry.
muted.
Not just know what the resources are, but know, because anyone can call 211 or Google shelter Longmont, Colorado, and get information. But I feel like it's very important to know resources as they apply to that person that you're trying to help. For example, I could say, hey, I need housing, and someone could say, oh, well, here, go here, 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 and here. And I could try each one of those places, and they can say, well, you have to be part of this group, or you have to do this, but here's the address for a food bank. And so it's not, it's not helpful to get all of this information, and then it just confuses people and makes them lose hope if they, are denied places. And so having a knowledge of what's available and to what group or to who or for how long is a good start, so that you can direct people in the right way, that it's not going to just deny them and tell them to quit, trying. So,
Yeah.
I've spoken to a lot of people that I say, well, have you done this? And they're like, yes, I've done this, this, and this, and I still, nobody can help me. You guys stink. And they have this attitude then that they're in the system. And then I have to say, well, no, we can actually do this for you. And, you have to convince them that you're able to help them. And that's kind of sad that you have to convince somebody that you're actually going to be of service to them,
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And so, Emily, we just had a comment about, let's see, from Evelyn, about getting close, realizing that those that are going through challenges like this want to be listened to, want to be heard, want to be known. And that's a really strong component of the framework that you operate in. Would you want to speak more to that?
Absolutely. I have learned that storytelling is the best way to understand how someone is feeling and thinking and how they perceive their life. For whatever reason, the first thing I do whenever I meet a new person is listen to their narrative. What got you here? What traumas have you had? I validate and I normalize their story. And I actually, after listening to their story, I actually make, I think, better decisions in how I'm going to apply the supports to someone. And just to give you some background on that, in social work school, we were taught equal is fair. And equal means everybody gets the same slice of the pie. What I've learned in 15 years in this field is equal is not the way to go. It's actually equitable, meaning if you meet someone who needs more assistance because they have very limited supports and very high barriers, we should be investing our time and efforts differently and financially than, say, someone who had one situation that maybe they fell behind rent. So there's levels of need, and we need to be looking at it from an equitable standpoint and incorporating their narrative so that we understand why sending them, like Renee says, to that resource is just going to elicit more disappointment and more barriers rather than sending them to the right place where their hope and their dignity is starting to increase. So that's the way I operate. And that's why at TRI, we look at things equitably, not equally.
Yeah, thank you. Really nice way to frame that. You're awesome. And Tim, you mentioned phrases like inclusionary housing, workforce housing. What do those mean? And how could others understand them and support them? And how might they contribute to a more equitable community?
Right. Well, that goes back a little bit to what Emily was speaking to on what does affordable housing mean. Really across the spectrum, we're in need of housing, within our community at all economic levels. And so the layering is what this is really about. Yes, we need more low income. When I speak to low income in our realm, as it also relates to reentry initiative and folks going through the HOPE services, those are generally considered people of 30% area median income and below. So the quite low or very low income, as is classified often through HUD. But even still, that the workforce housing is in a shortage as well. And that's generally considered 50 to 80% of area median income. That's a lot of the folks that might be, those that work for the Boulder County hub or teachers or what have you, and professionals, and that is lacking as well. And so when we talk about the NIMBYism or in your backyard kinds of things, or any resistance to those, we're really talking about taking away opportunities from some people who might just be regular working folks, and that just doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't really at any level. But particularly if we are doing things such that it inhibits those who are employed within our city limits and are people checking out our groceries, or maybe they're our insurance agent, or what have you, pick the profession. If those folks don't have access to adequate housing, then they're going to look elsewhere outside of our community. And I don't think that's the kind of community we want to be about. So, so again, it goes back to the intention or the understanding of affordable housing, and the inclusionary zoning, circling back to that. And I know we have some city folks on in this conversation in the background as well. That could certainly speak to this with much more authority than I could, but the general understanding is that we want to have by 2035, I believe, 12% of our new development to be considered affordable. But that also means home ownership. So single family homes in that 80 to 120% AMI range. What can we do to impact that and increase development there? And so, there's the carrot or the stick option sometimes that's involved with these decisions on the city level. I applaud the city. I think it's done a lot of good things and really has a good understanding of where we're at. And but the city is not in the business of building housing. It's and the city is us. When we talk about the city, keeping that in mind, we are the city, and so we're tasked with creative solutions. But just as these complexities are varied around homelessness and where a person may be at, and Renee shares her story, we have people of all different backgrounds and circumstances, and thus the solutions also need to be creative and very diverse as well. So it's going to need all of those different spectrums and continuums of housing. Some people, yes, may be homeowners, and an avenue like Habitat for Humanity that was actually thrown out there in a chat. Habitat's part of our continuum, part of our supportive services of these agencies that are represented here. But still would require a certain amount of income. And so for home ownership of any kind, even a subsidized situation like a Habitat house. So, but all of these should be explored. All of these should be supported. And if we can, again, begin with that concept that this is for the good of our community, and again, we all in the long run would benefit from supporting these kinds of things, we'll see results over time. It's going to take some time, though. This is not a magic, there's no perfect or ideal solution, but there are many things in play already, and I applaud those efforts already that we are starting to see, but we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's awesome. We've got two more solutions to lay out there. One has to do with policy, and the other goes deeper into creating options for affordable housing. But I'm noticing that some of our questions also draw in a little bit more depth to those two answers. So I'm going to call on Emily and Joseph in just a second to speak to those, but we're at the 1 o'clock mark, which we said we'd open it to questions. So let's bring that into the question realm, and you can speak to policy and housing. I'd like to just take this really short intermission to say one of the solutions, one of the ways that you can really support this issue is to support the nonprofits right before you. Donating, volunteering your time, bringing your skills and gifts, because we're actually part of the solution. Everyone here is able to speak to it so eloquently because we're being a part of the solution, and we're willingly, as human beings and as organizations, plunging ourselves into the messiness of it. knowing that there aren't pat solutions, that everything is tailored and everything is a response to what's before us. But there are some fundamental things that we can do and offer to help be part of the solution. The dream, and this came up in our panelist meeting, would be that there would no longer be a need for our organizations. The community would be this kind of human service agency itself, where our organizations would just be kind of absorbed into the larger community. That would be the awesome solution. But until then, we'll work towards it. So you can take a look at any of the websites. We have hopeforlongmont.org, the reentryinitiative.org, the inbetween.org. So all three of those websites, you have ways to give. Today's Giving Tuesday, which is a national giving day. And next Tuesday is Colorado Gives Day, which is a statewide giving day. And Colorado gives kickbacks. You can even schedule a donation today. And then on Colorado Gives Day, it will count towards the organizations. So support us financially, support us with your time, support us by making a phone call to any of the people that are here to talk more deeply about the issue. Everyone has made themselves available, and you can see by the passion of all four of the panelists that there's a desire to serve the need, there is a desire to meet the need, and there is a desire to talk about the need so that we can even do our job even better. So we're available, as busy as we all are, we're available for those conversations outside this panel as well. So let's jump in. So one of the solutions that Joseph mentioned was creating attainable housing options. And, you know, there's a slew of questions in the chat box that are noting, what about commercial complexes? Can these be converted into housing? Can there be new contracts or regulations or support systems in place so that builders can contract with the city to build attractive housing options for those in need? You know, there was a bigger range of possibilities there, and there was the acknowledgement that even though many aren't homeless, many cannot afford homes. I know Evelyn in the chat box mentioned, you know, she's lived here for quite a number of years and can't afford a home like many of us. I know I count myself in that contingency. So Joseph, how might you speak to that, creating affordable housing and some of these practical questions that are coming up in our chat box?
Yeah, no, I appreciate some of the questions. I can't afford a home here in Longmont, and I'm the executive director of Hope. I currently rent a home for my family. And so, you know, it does hit home to me as well, being a part of this community. There's some great dialogue. I would love to actually have a discussion with some of the council members, city staff, some developers, and those who own commercial real estate. I think, you know, we talk about creative solutions. There's clearly a lot of openings on the commercial real estate side that are going to be happening and probably will be for a little while because of what landscape of you know what's happening and you know business is changing. And so, you know, I believe Joan Peck, Councilwoman Peck, put a comment in the box that there's it makes more sense for a commercial building to remain empty from a tax break side than it does to try to convert it into something else. You know, maybe we should look at that, right? And from a city standpoint, from what can we do to really enhance those that own property and buildings to you know push more towards affordable housing? If commercial real estate is not where it's going to be at, well, what can we do? Let's think creative. I'm all about thinking creative solutions. Solutions are right in front of us all the time, you know. And I'm a big believer in making communities that are beautiful, fit within existing communities, you know, whether it be tiny homes. I know council is looking at lowering the size. I know there's a minimum size requirement on homes, and Polly and Joan, forgive me if I mess up the size on this, but I know that was a discussion that taken place. But you know, lowering the minimum size of a home, we don't, you know, homes can be a varying size for many different folks. Let's look at some variables like that in our community. You know, and land is a big deal. right? Land is a big deal around here. I know that we are big on open space between here and Boulder and Boulder County. We take pride in these open space areas that Boulder County is, but maybe we can also take some pride in using some space for affordable housing. I mean, there's not a lot of land in the city proper, but Boulder County owns a lot, right? There's politics there. So there are some great ideas out there. And I know for one that there's a lot of politics and red tape that, you know, when we have these great ideas, but let's not stop those ideas. And even in the chat, there's some great ideas coming about that we can look at. It's going to take some more folks besides us on this panel to get them through. But, you know, it starts with those ideas. Let's start with those ideas. Let's put them out there, you know, from a council level to business owners level. And let's start there, because anything more than what we're doing is going to help. All right, we need to continue this process of building more. And, you know, like, I just want to bring up real quick, I know RVs has been a big issue, right? And the council just passed an ordinance. But part of the RV debate, though, that was so intriguing a lot of folks was the aspect of affordable housing, and folks did not have a place to go with their RVs, right? Because they were very limited on income, and a lot of folks living in RVs had a small amount of income. They did not have the ability to move into housing, so RVs was their homes. And I'm not going to go into a big debate on right or wrong in this, but this was part of this discussion, right? And it needs to be addressed, because, you know, folks are living in RVs, that is their home right now. Now they're going to have to move as of the end of the year. But if we have more opportunities of housing, you know, there could be a different dialogue with the RV topic. So yeah, there's a lot there. I am excited from a positive standpoint that the ideas are there. I know we can work together as a community. There's a lot of great minds in this community. We can come up with some great solutions to really make Longmont, you know, to continue to be an incredible place to live.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. We'll jump back to RV in just a minute, but I want to give Emily a chance too to kind of dovetail on that, because Emily has had a passion for policy influence as well. And I don't know about any of you here, that's probably the place that I feel most powerless, is an influence from a systematic healing where we've gone astray. You know, the original intention of a system set in place, and then the snowball effect happens. And with the snowball effect and the complicatedness, then the reason a policy came into place doesn't serve its initial goal. How do you influence policy? How can that be a solution for us that feel powerless, Emily?
Right, and that goes back to my point of people that work in business in different sectors of the community. If you're in a power position or just employee of an organization, I encourage you to go back to your policies that you have for your services, making sure to look through them and making sure they're not discriminatory, making sure that they're equitable. You know, adding in, getting your council people involved, starting locally. Is definitely one way to address policy issues, but policy isn't the only thing. And I just saw a chat about LHOT. LHOT has been contemplating this issue for a long time, and I do agree with whoever wrote that message that we do a lot of talking about housing and what do we do in building housing, and what are the next steps. And I really think it comes down to, I am one nonprofit. It's very hard to grow capital, to get the capital, to buy the building, to make it the housing that I want. But if I could bring more EDs from all the different nonprofits to the table with me, and we all went in like a coalition together, and I just saw another chat about going to a bank together, maybe we could collectively get more capital, build the housing, and all the nonprofits would play a part in the services we're providing. And it wouldn't be housing based on population, it would be communal housing. So you could have people that have felonies living with people that are just homeless and struggling with substance abuse. Because again, it's such a complex issue that there's not one policy that needs to be changed. It's in every sector that needs to be reviewed and dive under and figure out where are we not being equitable here, and how do we help everybody get to the same level field.
And there's an opportunity here for all of us. Thank you, Emily. I attended a philanthropy meeting right when I first stepped on board with Hope, because COVID had just taken over the country and the world, to understand the movements with philanthropy. And one of these speakers for one of these multi-million-dollar foundations that was talking about where philanthropy was going to be going and what we could look towards, pointed out something that we see historically to be true over and over again, is that when there is crisis, and that's the crunch, when there's contraction, when there's pressure and heat on something, the real solutions come from the marginalized areas and come from a place of innovation. So COVID is an opportunity for us, because of the crunch, the heat that's on us, to take very seriously that we that are part of the discussion, we are either part of the marginalized or we're serving the marginalized, that we can be the instigators for innovative solutions. So the ideas that are coming up in the chat box, what Emily's saying, what everyone's saying, we're well poised. It's a reason to actually have hope, because statistically and historically, we're in a position of strength. And Renee, do you have anything you'd like to add right now to the discussion? I know you haven't had a chance to chime in with all your expertise in the last couple minutes. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. So it was mentioned about the coalitions to work with mortgage companies and other people to actually create something, or a partnership. I feel like doing this with landlords or housing complexes would also be a benefit, creating some sort of partnership or MOU with certain landlords that we can go to. Hey, we have a new client that needs housed, here's the situation, and they say okay, or they come to us and say, hey, we have an opening at this spot, do you have anybody that would fit? And I think that would be a good option as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you. What about you, Tim? Would you like to add something into this?
Yeah, I guess I hadn't volunteered before that. The in-betweens had a little bit of experience in actually developing property. Recently, we built 6 permanent rental units in a collaborative effort with the United Church of Christ. It was an underutilized piece of land, a 1/4 acre piece of land, of which they donated in between, and then we built 6 affordable units. Those will be permanently affordable for people who are elderly disabled. Also, we added a 6th building earlier this year, mid-year, to increase our capacity to offer more transitional housing. And so we purchased a 10-unit apartment complex. And at that same time, we're considering a build in collaboration. And behind the scenes, we have our creative juices always flowing and thinking about this and solutions. And so Dave Emerson, the executive director of Habitat for Humanity, along with the In-Between, and we mentioned Gary Kinsey, who's actually the 3 of us put in an offer on a piece of land to hopefully develop something that would be rentals as well as the opportunity for home ownership with some townhomes. We didn't get the bid on the particular property, so that didn't go through. But I think you have to understand that when we're talking about coming in and providing affordable housing at different varying levels, and of course that would have been a collaborative effort to provide housing at different and varying income levels. In between, we probably would have looked at the lowest, again, that very low income. If the cost to purchase a piece of land as well as to build something exceed or go beyond a certain price point, it's not even feasible for an entity like an In-Between or any of these other nonprofits to take that on without some kind of subsidy. And what we're talking about, just roughly speaking, is if we're able to bring in about half of that cost or come in through grant support or 0% interest loans through affordable housing loans that the city offers, or those kinds of options, then we have a shot at being able to to design and create such a thing. But you have to be able to come in with about those kinds of dollars. About half the cost needs to be otherwise essentially banked through other affordable means like grants or low interest loans, because you understand then that the rents that might be collected if you're creating a rental situation, or the mortgages are going to be at such a level that you can't pay that, you wouldn't be able to sustain that second or third mortgage you might be taking on that piece of land. And so all of these factors come into play, and I just, again, speaking to the complexity of it, and it's not to say that there's not desire to do that, but it requires those kinds of dollars that a city or a state of Colorado Department of Housing, those types of things can provide to support those types of efforts. Longmont Housing Authority has been doing significant development over the past years and has added some inventory, particularly again for people who are seniors and disabled folks. There are efforts being made to that end, but it takes money, ultimately it comes down to that. And it takes a significant amount of money to develop a piece of property, particularly with today's construction costs. So it's a city has a place in this, but again, they provide the infrastructure for us to be able to do this. But the desire and the creative and the innovative thoughts are those that we can share together. And, when we had, again, the United Church of Christ that just came forward and said, we have a piece of land we're considering doing something with, and housing seems to be a critical need in the community. What do you think? And they came to the in-between, really uninvited, and opened, paved the way for us to do that. If we have more people like that are willing to say, let's think about this. What could this be? What could this look like? And then find the partnerships. We can talk about that, and it can lead to something real. But it's a development that we all can share together. And I think there are interests within our community for those that would want to take on those types of projects and do some things, do some good things for the community for the long term.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. And how many families does the in-between have right now?
We have 88 apartment units, 88 households. They're all apartments. About a fourth of those are permanent supportive housing, and the other 3/4 are transitional housing, supportive housing. But I would say at any given time, we have about 170, 180 individuals, about 100 of which are children under the age of 18. Yeah.
And so I'm going to read one of these comments in here and just plant a seed as well. What's being put out there over and over again is the more we talk about it, the more we will tend to collaborate. So even if you walk forward from this discussion, making a commitment that you're actually going to talk about this a little more, talk about it with somebody that you don't normally talk to about this kind of a thing, then somebody who maybe owns a lot of land who never even thought about it might say, I could give a little bit of that land. Or somebody who knows someone else who's a big investor in local communities says, wow, I never really thought about that. That's how really, really great ideas come into form, is they get talked about and somebody gets inspired that has the resources to contribute to the solution. So I don't know who said this, but it says most other nations provide public housing for up to 25% of their population. This is paid for, built by, and managed by the government. America began to disinvest at the time of Nixon and move over to public-private partnerships. Reagan got us completely out in effect. We have 50 years of no real public housing. Does anybody want to contribute to that statement there? Is there any comment, any way that hits you? What your thoughts are, your experience?
Yeah, I think that comment speaks directly to this American dream ethos that we're trying to drill home. If you look at other countries, specifically in my work, the prison systems, we incarcerate over 2 million people nationwide a year. That's 2 million human bodies that could be building economy for us, bringing in income, investing in our community, and instead we put them in jail cells. So, and when you look at, for instance, Sweden or Norway or other countries, those countries are looking at prison time as rehabilitative time to invest in our people, to help them through their challenges and come back out to give back to their community. So speaking to that, I do think that's where policy comes in. That's where, if you're in a position and you can go from the local level to the statewide to the federal level, you know, explaining how the lack of investment from the years before is now affecting the communities that we live in today. And I just want to say, you know, I myself am an ED, and I rent as well. I cannot afford a home. Yet I was born and raised with this idea that I'm going to go to school, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to have a car, I'm going to have a house, a dog, and a husband. And you know, that's not the reality, even for someone like myself. And I would say that I was born with privilege. So again, it's so complex. And I do appreciate that comment, because we do need to take a cue from other countries that do it a little bit better.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Maybe we even need to take it further and look towards redefining what we call American dream.
Absolutely.
That it fit who and what we really are when we talk about the word freedom, what we really want to aspire to, what that means. So Joseph, were you going to add something in on that comment? Did I see you go off mute?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a big deal for me, where I know a lot of times, and for those council members still on this webinar, you know, I know we put a lot of blame on government for not doing enough or doing this or that. You know, at the end of the day, it's we, you know, Tim made this mention, we are the city of Longmont, right? We as a collective have a lot of power. You know, there's a comment where, you know, Joan just put that, you know, they're working on the Costco and there'll be some affordable housing. Like, get involved, right? Get involved, make your voice heard. We can do this from a private public collaborative, but it's going to take a lot of voices speaking up on need and overpowering interests that want to put things above, you know, affordable housing. And so I really truly believe that, you know, we can come together as nonprofit organizations, come together as community organizations, and restructure our thinking around this issue. We can do a lot of good. And instead of waiting for, you know, a government bailout or for anything of that nature, there's a lot of resources here. We've talked about some of them, we've brought them up. If we can tap into those, right? The biggest resource is sitting right here with the brain power, and there's a lot of brilliant ideas. Those brilliant ideas will then turn into real collaborative efforts. You know, there's land out there that, you know, either can be donated, like, you know, in between, like Tim mentioned, you know, there are churches out there with excess land, right? Let's do something about that. I see a lot of church parking lots that are sitting empty right now, especially. You know, there's a lot of businesses that can maybe get tax breaks if they donate, you know, property to nonprofits like ours. You know, let's start thinking outside the box. And you know what? Little by little, we can start making systematic change. It's not going to change overnight. We know that, right? And the idea is that, you know, Emily, Tim, and I are out of jobs, and, you know, we can go build widgets in a factory or something. But we get to that point by small change, little by little. And that's my challenge. And I keep thinking that from a hope perspective. And I know Tim and Emily, you all deal with this too in your organizations. Like, we can't change everything overnight, but what can we do today? And that will lead to change tomorrow, right? So that's a big thing for me. You know, it's there, instead of blaming, let's shift into what we can do, right? There are a lot of decisions that have been poorly made in the past, but we can make greater decisions now to affect the future. And that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and there's something when a solution really takes off and is attractive to a body of people, it's infectious. I mean, think of the fad things that happen. You know, I'm not into fads, but, you know, one thing will come out that's attractive to the psyche in some way. And all of a sudden, 1 million of them are sold, or 5 billion of them are sold. You know, one attractive solution will be infectious in a community. And hearkening back to Emily's emphasis on creating an experience that's dignified when we talk about homing, creating an environment that is attractive sensibly, cares for the whole person. What happens, I found this, I was working a few years back in Denmark and in Vienna for a little bit of time. And in both of those communities, there was a very high emphasis on forms of community housing that everyone participated in, whether they made a lot of money or not a lot of money. It wasn't income driven, it was more community, social driven. And these ways they lived were so attractive. I mean, I wanted to live in those communities. The ways that they had very limited recycling happening because of how you could get food and use your containers. And it was made really super easy, but it was very aesthetically pleasing, and it was simple, and it was cheaper. And there was greater human engagement among the broader demographic of people, regardless of their background. And for me, having that experience made me want it for myself, which I don't really find that so much in America. We don't have those kind of community living situations. But I'm a big believer too, that if we start with a small step like that and have one or two things in Longmont that are incredibly attractive, what will happen is others then will want, oh, I think I could build something like that, or participate in helping build something like that. And then what happens? You end up having a community slowly change its and repurpose its buildings, its lands, and its intentions. So I think that too is an easy solution that can be applied. Well, we have up more in the feed. I don't know if anybody wants to tackle this, because it's very clear that this is a very complex issue. But we did have one question. Can you name the biggest systemic barrier to obtaining housing in Boulder County? What would it be? Could you, like, does anybody want to take a stab? And it's okay if we have to float that one by. I appreciate the question very much. It's nice to kind of hone in to see if it could be named, but it seems to me like it's too complex to hit one on the head. What would you all say?
I'll take a stab at this one. Every person's story is unique and why they need housing and why they can't afford housing. But to me, the end of it is there's just not enough, right? So if we look at from a quantitative standpoint, there's a lot of variables to why someone is in their position, but at the end of it, they need one thing. They need a stable environment. They need a stable place. And so for me, I look at this as the more stock, the more supply we can put into the system, the better off we'll be. And yeah, to me, that's where it starts and ends. Yeah, there's so many variables we talked about, and they're valid and so important. But without the home, without housing, you know, those others are variables that are still going to be present.
Thank you.
I would just add on, for instance, like see that Vicki just wrote, you know, first month's rent and last month's rent, security deposits. We're providing that as a support service. But what I really would like to see are the restrictions and eligibility for people to obtain the housing to be relooked at. So if you have a thing on your eligibility for rental units that you can't have a felony, I want you to question that and ask yourself why that is a policy, that if you have a felony, you aren't dignified enough to have a rental in your apartment. That would be where I start, or yeah, just the eligibility for certain services needs to be looked upon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Can I offer, Kim, I guess I'm always kind of not always a rule follower. So can I take a different approach to that question and maybe say, because I think that it's far too complex to come up with one thing, like it's substance use or it's income, or lack of income, or a family separation or something like that, or medical. I mean, go on and on and on. There's so many different variables that can lead someone to a situation where they're housing insecure. But rather, I think on the flip side, the point I was trying to make before, which is really important, and all of us do within these nonprofits collectively and others that aren't even here, is the supportive component is critical. Even if you obtain housing on your own or through an agency, having a ongoing and access to somebody, or a navigator, or a resource specialist, an advocate, somebody, that's really important to keep and sustain the housing and moving forward. So a lot of research has shown that it's, you can house folks, but they can fall out of housing due to any variety of things that happen. But, and in some cases, some people need to relearn things if they, haven't, or just need that support to be able to kick ideas around or a handful of timely resources that happen to intervene right when it's necessary, so such that you can get past that small step and move forward. And that's what that's the supportive component of housing. Whether it's provided directly, through somewhere like the in-between, or, it's a service provided by an entity for someone who's housed elsewhere, it's all the same. I think that's a really important piece that oftentimes is forgotten. The housing, yes, is important, and we need the place, we need the building, but the support that runs with it can make all the difference.
I definitely agree with that, Tim. Emily and the Reentry Initiative are constantly asking how I'm doing, if I need anything, just checking in and making sure everything's going okay. And without that, it was difficult anyway, but with their assistance, I've even asked them, hey, so I need a babysitter. Do you know of any organizations that would provide training for my son so he could become a child care provider? And just the fact that I had that availability to ask that question is great. And I felt open enough to just say, hey, I need help with this small thing, or just anything. And so it's been very important. It's the follow-up and this continued support. So.
Right. And that just speaks to the idea that when you have control or some direct influence on where the donated dollars get to go, that's what I do with it, is you make those case-by-case decisions, and you continue to support. There is no end line to self-sufficiency, or an end date, I should say. Self-sufficiency can take years. Even I'm learning to still be self-sufficient. So again, you're only as strong as your community, and that's why, if you can bend the rules, find a way to get innovative and change it.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of great comments and insights there. Early on, and I know Joseph used the word RV in that, but it came up as a question because we know it is an issue in our community, and laws have changed recently. The question came up, what can we do to help and deal with people living on the streets in their RVs?
Well, there's the system answer, there's the individual answer. Like what we're talking about now is a solution that someone who is forced to live in an RV, and there's a difference between those that choose, right? There's the van life, folks that want to travel and live in that. And then we're not talking about those. I'm talking about folks that have to, like this was the only option for them. It's affordable housing. And we had a situation where someone in our shelter literally saved up money for a couple months and bought an RV. And for him, that was a way to be self-sufficient, right? That to him was his housing opportunity, and a way for him to be self-sufficient, because housing was so far out of reach. When he looked at the cost of trying to get an apartment and the month to month of what it was going to take, he realized, you know what? It's easier for me to just get an old RV. Granny ran into issues with it breaking down all the time and a lot of issues there. But, that's the mental mindset that a lot of people face. housing is out of reach for me. So what are my other options? And generally it's, I'm going to stay in the shelter system for what seems like forever. I might be able to get on the waiting list for in between if they have some open spaces. But you know, the options are not that appealing for folks in this position. And I think part of this dialogue is increasing the options that people have. Renee said it best about the ability to choose instead of being forced into something, right? One of the great aspects of freedom is that we have the ability to choose where we want to live based on our income level, and we can go there, right? But you know, for many folks, that's not an option. And so this idea of how can we help? Yes, there's the instant approach, right? If someone needs help, talk to them, build a relationship with them, see what they need. For many folks, it may be just money to get through, or right now in the wintertime, propane's a big deal. I know we won't have many RVs on our streets after January 1, but for many people, heating is a big, you know, something they deal with. You know, someone on the street, you know, this isn't the place where I can dive into the issues affecting homelessness, because there is a lot of systematic factors that are unfortunately keeping people where they're at. So from a public standpoint, you know, the best thing I would always recommend is that build relationship. You never know when someone's life, you know, that person on the corner that you drive by every single day holding the sign, just getting to know them may actually change your own life. It's happened to me numerous times. That's why I got into this line of work, is because before I used to judge the person on the corner, and instead I decided, let me just talk to them instead of judging them. And I found out their story, and time again, their stories just made me stop and just question me, like why I was even judging in the first place, and realize there's much more than what I know to be the narrative. And so, you know, this question of help is big. You know, one of the ways we can help is support us as nonprofits. We're in the trenches every day. We're doing this work. We're doing the best we can with our resources. So that's the immediate, right? And as we have these dialogues and these discussions, we can look to the future to give people more opportunities than just, this is your option. This is it. You have one option and this is it. That's not freedom in any sense.
Great, thank you, Joseph. Thank you.
Just want to add to that with the RV. I actually had an experience where we were trying to support someone with rent at an RV park. And we were told by the funding source that that wasn't considered stable housing. So I, again, encourage you, question everything. Who's deciding what stable housing looks like for someone else? Because stable housing for myself doesn't look like the same for someone that I work with, or a peer of mine, or a friend of mine. So if someone asked me, do you have stable housing? I would say yes, but by all means, I'm not a homeowner. So again, just always question why that's not considered stable housing, and get involved and change it.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And so, not to take lightly these coined terms we use: affordable housing, stable housing, American dream, all the rest. And you know, bringing it back to, because we're going to be coming to the end of our time, there's one more question in the chat, but bringing it back a little bit to the red lines and the transportation. Who would like to just say a little bit more? Emily laid out a nice kind of lay of the land to understand, but what might be some practical examples that we might leave everybody with on how we can make an influence when it comes to availability to resources such as transportation, internet, obtaining food, those sorts of things that maybe aren't big challenges to all of us, but are super big challenges to others.
Yeah, I like to say, you know, the city of Longmont has done a pretty good job. I mean, with their Next Light service, they started a program for those that could qualify, can get reduced cost internet. The city does have a web of services for families, and I know the school system works together. And this is really where the city network, does a good job of providing basic needs. I mean, we have a free bus system, for crying out loud. I mean, that's incredible. What municipality our size has that, where you can get on the bus for free? You go out anywhere in the city of Longmont. So there are some pretty amazing resources from a city level, and I applaud the city of Longmont for the forward thinking in that regard. And so there are some positive aspects to take away, that we are doing some things that I think are right for support networks. Obviously, there can always be more. The city of Longmont can never do everything on their own enough to support everyone that's in need. But I will say I am impressed from a system support level, especially with COVID. I've seen the St. Vrain School District, the transportation system really all come together as a big support pool for those that need it. We mentioned rental assistance. I mean, I was reading the Art Center, they'll probably give out close to $1 million in rental assistance this year, just because shows the need, right? So there are some support systems in place to hopefully help keep people in. I know the city of Longmont even has reduced utilities for those that qualify. So I'll instead of stating more of a need, I will say that I will applaud that there are some things in place that have been beneficial to folks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think even one of the little ways, because I know when we were chatting and Tim, you brought up about internet, we were talking a bit about internet. When we make a post as an organization, your organizations are the same. Who sees that post? So when we put out there, emergency sheltering is happening tomorrow because it's going to be 5 degrees outside, the people who don't have phones or don't have internet and need that shelter don't have it. If you have a phone that you're not using anymore, instead of selling it on Amazon, you could give it to someone, because even if you can't afford a phone plan, you can tap into Wi-Fi in so many places and have access to some form of communication. There are little things like that that could be done. What might be some ways that we could bring a little bit more availability on the technology end? Or how might any of you speak to that? Because that reinforces discrimination and inequality.
Well, what I found in my population is that when they've been away in prison for quite some time, they're behind with technology. So they don't really know how to operate in our world. So one thing we do is we teach technology basic skills. And we get donated phones and we set them up with minutes, and we apply for government assisted phones. So we'll do anything creatively in order to minimize the discriminatory issues that are happening, or the challenges happening in them re-entering into their community.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess I'm going to piggyback on what Joseph, you were saying as well, in that we have a fairly robust network of supports around technology, around transportation in the city of Longmont. That's really really quite remarkable. So I think that's to be celebrated. It's just one quick thing, when we ran into at the in-between, as school systems transition to more of an online learning situation right now with COVID-19 being what it is, right away we look to our residents, those are families with kids, and we're curious, do they have reliable internet access? If the kids are meant to log on and have to do schoolwork that way, is that even practical? Is it possible? But lo and behold, then there were resources in the community as we dug a little deeper. Next Light was one of those, but also this St. Vrain School District was giving out hotspots to families that qualified, and so we were able to outfit really most of our families that had kiddos with those types of services that were available to the community. So if there's something, it's not to say we're checking off boxes, but this would be one of those things where I think we can say there's always more and different we can do, but this is a strength, I think, of the in-between around some of these things that we're talking about right here. housing maybe isn't one of those, but again, we're on the road, and knowledge is power. And so knowing what we know, we can work towards solutions. But we do have a lot of great things to celebrate within this city of Longmont to that end.
To add to Kimberly's comment about people, we have groups that say, hey, the shelter's open tonight, but if you don't have a phone or you don't have a way to access that information, you don't know. If there were some kind of, I guess, virtual care packet that could be given out to people, like you leave prison, you get the $100 gift card, and you get this care package of like a bundled up group of, I guess, Facebook groups or Twitter conversations to log on to, and that would kind of be a solution to that. So people would know, oh, if I join this group and this group, I'll always know about everything related to homelessness in Longmont, or I will know how to get shoes, or I think that's a good, and that wouldn't be expensive to put together either. It would just be time consuming, gathering all of the resources into one nice package. So sorry.
Care. Right, and to take that serious, we focus so much on meeting the physical needs, and that is absolutely necessary, but recognize within that there are lots of virtual needs as well to allow somebody to kind of really be a part of the community around them. So as somebody asked if they could quantify what our need is, that Boulder County, the Everyone Counts survey said there are 700 homeless in Boulder County. 25% of the homeless needs are in Longmont. There was an estimate that maybe 3,200 units we need, that we're short of meeting needs. So that's a big disparity between 175 units, 3,200 units. Can we give any numbers that might say what could help solve the problem if all of a sudden somebody with a lot of land and money stepped forward and said, I'll build all the units?
I need housing for people with felony records and sex offenders.
Yeah, thank you.
And I start with 50.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly, Emily. You know what? It is hard to quantify this. One of the things that does make this difficult is that, Longmont last year was named the top boomtown in the country. And we have people moving here with, very little resources, and so, and then that's a positive for our community, right? We want to be known as a great place to live, and we have jobs and we have a lot of resources for folks. But, if we just if we were just place a line, where we are in the current population, like the point in time count, is well underrepresented. We figured it's probably about 1,000 people just in Boulder County that are experiencing homelessness. And then you got to take into effect the poverty level of folks, where there's many folks on the brink, paycheck to paycheck. COVID has shown us this, that many will be, on the brink without homes very soon, or there'll be issues there. So, that number, I don't know. And I think the best way to answer that is, let's just keep building, because we aren't going to reach that capacity level anytime soon.
All right, thank you. Thank you. And one comment we had, and then we're going to need to wrap it up. 2 hours went quick, and lots of great reflections and solutions out there. Is that up in the beginning? Oh, Tim, did you want to say something before I
was just going to offer that the 3,200 units shortage is an old number now. We're actually making strides. The city of Longmont has this information posted on its website as to inclusionary zoning and some of the gains that are now being made. But at the time when the study was done, I think it was like 2015, I might be off a year or two, but those were numbers I think related to then as to the shortage or speaking to the housing need. But it's it's not likely that we're going to build our way out of this. So it's not just about building, it's also about different ways of doing things. And to Emily's point, eligibility criteria, different things, maybe need to be looked at as well. So those are not people being left out of the picture based on criteria that they simply can't meet. But the cities has also, again, in these conversations, someone threw out LHOT. LHOT is, Longmont Housing Opportunities Team, and those conversations, yes, have been taking place for years. That the solutions are again varied, and so ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and city relaxing or providing some inroads for people to consider building, let's say a one bedroom apartment above their garage, if they're in an area that where there isn't an HOA or something else getting in the way of that. But that's exploring these types of different ways of approaching the lack of inventory, not just building buildings. That's the most expensive way to get there, but it has to happen too. That's but to complement it, there are other things, and ADUs is again one of those pieces. People rent out rooms within their homes. All of those things are part of the broader solution.
Thank you. And also to add on to that is more of a suggestion than a question posed earlier on by Richard Jordan, is just the thought of teaming up with other movements that are going on nationally. And he's mentioning Mary's Place in Seattle that receives a lot of support. And they have an Hour of Code event from December 7th through the 13th, sponsored by Amazon. So the question was, could our homeless people be served by participating in it? Would they participate? Could they? And it might be a unique partner to contact. So a little bit more of a suggestion to the three organizations here. But if anybody'd like to make a comment on that before we do some closing remarks, let me know. It's a great idea. And to bear in mind that, just like anything that we're contributing, a lot of times we're being seen statewide and nationally for contributions that we make. So we too can partner with and learn from other places, especially with technology and globalization, shortening the distance between us. But would anybody like to comment on Mary's Place before we do some closing remarks? Okay, great. Well, I'd like to really thank everyone for participating. We are just thrilled that you signed up for this conversation, in your contributions in the chat box, in your willingness to open your mind and your heart to be on the listening end to the experts that we have here. And I say that word experts, knowing that you now see that as well. It's one thing to serve the people that we serve. It's another thing to bring the level of passion and devotion of mind and heart and soul that these four people do to what we're doing and what we're contributing around housing. So this should give you a little taste of the three organizations as well. And know that your trust is not ill-founded in the funding and the support that you offer to HOPE, to the Reentry Initiative, to the In-Between. You have amazing people right here serving on the front lines on all the different levels. So I thank each one of you for your contributions, and want to invite you, if you'd like, to take 60 seconds with any closing remarks you'd like to offer before we close out.
I just want to thank Kim for coming to me and bringing up this opportunity, and thank the panelists that decided to join us. It's been very encouraging for me to continue forward with our mission. And I feel like from our next steps, I would like to connect with some of our participants today who can and are able. I'd like to continue the conversation, put some action steps together, and start researching ways that we can collectively come together and support some more housing. Feel free to reach out.
I guess I'll say, reiterate the same. Certainly appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for everybody joining in and adding to the mix with your knowledge and suggestions. I think those are great comments that I was reading along the way. By no means do we have it all figured out, not even close. But as a community, we can do great things if we put our heads together. So if you're so compelled, reach out, talk to any one of us, have that conversation, have the what if we did this, or what about that, or have you considered? All those are great questions and are fun to have, and sometimes it leads to good, something really relevant happening. So, but again, I appreciate it, and this was really, really interesting. So thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly, for spearheading this, and Emily as well. And I just, I want to say, so often in the nonprofit realm, we feel that we go at our service alone, and we purposely go out there with this mindset that we have to do it alone. And you know what? We're changing that narrative, especially here in Longmont, that we as separate organizations, although separately run, we come together on a lot of things, and this is one of them. That it's important for all of us to come together. We all fundraise separately. We all try to raise money separately. We have our donors and separate boards, and we have separate aspects. But at the end of the day, we want to see the same thing. And talks like this are really key. That we as three organizations, the community that's listening on and watching, they see this. This is important. This is vital to our community, right? And I'll leave with that it gives me a heartwarming sense that we can do this together, and we don't have to do this just all alone.
Thank you. And Renee, let us hear your voice one more time.
Sorry. Yes, thank you for everyone's participation.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks again, everybody. And thanks for all the thank yous in the chat box. It's nice to have a heart of gratitude, right? So just remember, you can get involved in the discussion, in a donation, and volunteer of time, skillfulness, ideas. None of this is lost on us, as you probably are really clear on by this point. And just remember the websites, hopeforlongmont.org, the reentryinitiative.org, and the inbetween.org. And of course, you can just Google any form of those names and find all three organizations. So let's keep the conversation going. You can email me, Kimberly@hopeforlongmont.org, with any follow-up that you would like me to put through the channels. I'll also have a copy of the recording. We're going to decide what to do with it after this. So this is recorded, and we'll have that for distribution. So Kimberly@hopeforlongmont, with any way you would like to mediate any action steps or answer any questions or put you in contact with anybody. Have a great day, everyone. Look forward to see you. You are welcome. Thanks for the big thank you. You are super welcome, and we'll talk soon. Blessings.